She told him to move like he didn't belong. Then the pilot walked out and saluted him in front of everyone. The airport was loud, but Clarence didn't rush. He never did. He stood still for a moment inside the terminal of Birmingham Shuttlesworth International, letting the sound of rolling suitcases and overhead announcements pass over him like waves. His heart, steady as ever, carried the weight of decades, each step deliberate, each glance measured, as if he'd learned long ago that rushing only invited trouble. In his left hand was a small duffel, faded blue, with the zipper slightly frayed. In his right, his boarding pass, seat 2A, first class. Clarence didn't usually fly first class. He didn't see the need. But this ticket had been a gift from his church, a gesture of gratitude, they'd said, for his years of quiet service, fixing pews, mentoring youth, never asking for praise. He was heading to Savannah, Georgia, to see his great-grandson, Malik, perform in a school play, his very first role on stage. "You're the mayor," Malik had said on the phone, voice buzzing with excitement. "You get to wear a hat and everything, Papa." So, Clarence had agreed. He'd pressed his one good gray polo shirt the night before, ironed the crease into his slacks just right, and made sure his shoes were clean. He'd polished them twice, not for vanity, but because Malik deserved to see his papa at his best. Not new, just clean. At the gate, he waited his turn, scanning the area with eyes that had seen over 7 decades of change. When they called for first-class passengers, Clarence stepped forward, nodding politely to a young couple already standing in line. He didn't make eye contact long. He didn't like to draw attention. But he felt their eyes linger, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps wondering why a man like him, simple, unassuming, was boarding with the elite. Once inside the plane, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, the seats wider. Clarence made his way down the short aisle of first class and saw 2A waiting for him by the window, a seat he'd never sat in before. He placed his duffel in the overhead bin carefully and lowered himself into the seat with the kind of care that comes from years of living with a tricked knee. He adjusted his posture, not out of discomfort, but to sit with the dignity he'd always carried, a silent defiance against anyone who might question his place. He looked out the window. He always liked doing that, watching the luggage carts move, the crew coordinating, the way the tarmac baked under the Alabama sun. He could sit like that for hours, just watching people work, each doing their part. There was peace in that. Clarence reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Its edges were soft from years of handling, a relic of a life lived with intention. Inside was an old black-and-white photo. Him, barely 20, standing next to an F-4 Phantom jet, smiling like he didn't have a care in the world. He rubbed his thumb over the corner of the photo and smiled to himself. That boy never thought he'd live to see 80 or first class. He lingered on the memory, the roar of engines, the camaraderie of his unit, the promises made to fallen friends to live well for them. He tucked the photo back inside and leaned into his seat, just beginning to let himself relax. But something sharp broke through the calm like a needle and cloth. "Excuse me?" A sharp voice cut through the aisle, jolting Clarence from his quiet moment. He turned his head. A woman stood in front of him, late 30s or early 40s tall, with sleek hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a tailored cream blazer, dark jeans, and heels that didn't seem built for airports. Her perfume was sharp, expensive, cutting through the recycled air like a statement of superiority. Her carry-on bag was designer, no doubt expensive. Her expression irritated. "That's my seat," she said flatly, pointing to the 2A placard above Clarence's head. Clarence looked up, calm. "Ma'am," he said softly, "this is seat 2A. "No, it's mine," she snapped. "I always fly first." "There's no way I got anything but a window." Clarence gave a small nod and reached into his pocket again, producing the same boarding pass he'd tucked away earlier. "It says 2A. "See," he said, holding it out for her to look, but she didn't glance at the pass. Instead, she looked at him. All of him. His gray polo, his weathered skin, the deep lines that ran across his face like stories, nobody bothered to ask about. Then she looked at his hands, callous, dry, worn, as if those hands didn't belong on leather armrests. Her gaze was a blade, slicing through his presence, dismissing him as an error in the system. "No offense," she said with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes, "but are you sure you're in the right section? Maybe they made a mistake." Clarence kept his voice even. "I believe I'm where I'm supposed to be." His eyes held hers for a moment longer, not with anger, but with a quiet challenge, a reminder that he'd faced far worse than her condescension. At that point, a few passengers nearby began to shift in their seats. Some watched from behind magazines, others leaned forward, sensing the tension, their whispers like static in the air. Others glanced up from their phones. Nobody spoke, but eyes were moving. "I'll just get someone," the woman said, rolling her eyes. "This is ridiculous." She turned and waved down the nearest flight attendant, a young woman in her 20s, clearly new to the job. She approached with the nervous smile of someone who's still trying to figure out how to keep everyone happy. Her badge read trainee, and her hands fidgeted, betraying her inexperience. "Hi there," the flight attendant said. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there is," the woman said, gesturing toward Clarence like he was part of the furniture. "He's in my seat. Can you check?" The flight attendant looked at Clarence, who quietly handed over his boarding pass without saying a word. She scanned it. Her fingers trembled slightly, caught between the woman's insistence and Clarence's calm certainty. Then looked up, then looked again. "Oh," she said, voice barely above a whisper. It says 2A, the woman crossed her arms. "Well, that's not possible. My assistant always books me 2A. "Always?" The attendant glanced toward the front of the plane, unsure. I can double-check if you like." Clarence looked out the window again. He didn't say anything. His silence was heavy, a wall she couldn't breach, and it only fueled her frustration. His lips were pressed together, but his expression hadn't changed. The flight attendant hesitated. Then she did something Clarence didn't expect. She leaned down and said, "Sir, would you mind just stepping back to coach for a minute, just until I can sort this out?" Now it was silent. Real silent. Even the man in 2C, who'd been pretending to read the Wall Street Journal, lowered it. The cabin held its breath, the air thick with the weight of her words. A betrayal of fairness. Clarence turned to face her fully. There was no anger in his voice, no trace of frustration. He simply said, "Why?" The attendant blinked. "Just for a moment, sir. It'll help me figure this out." He held out the boarding pass again. "But I showed you. It says 2A. "I know, but then what is there to figure out?" Her smile cracked slightly. She fumbled for words, her training unraveling under the pressure of Clarence's unyielding calm and the woman's impatient glare. She didn't know how to answer. The woman beside them let out a loud sigh. "This is unbelievable." Clarence looked straight at the flight attendant, not with fire but with something deeper, something like disappointment, like a man who'd seen this kind of thing more times than she could count. He took a breath. "If I go back there," he said slowly, "people will think I did something wrong or that I wasn't supposed to be here. But I didn't do anything." His voice was low, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of being asked to step aside, to prove his worth, to justify his existence. And then, just as the flight attendant opened her mouth to respond, there was movement at the front of the plane. A shadow, then footsteps, slow and deliberate. The footsteps grew louder, steady, each one like it had a purpose. The flight attendant turned her head toward the cockpit, suddenly unsure of her next move. The cabin's attention shifted, a collective inhale as the figure emerged, authority radiating from his presence. From the front of the plane, a tall man stepped out. Tan skin, dark, short-cropped hair, and the kind of calm in his walk that made people instinctively sit up straighter. His uniform was crisp. His nameplate read Sanders. Captain Jeremy Sanders scanned the cabin briefly. His eyes landed on Clarence. Then the flight attendant. Then the woman still clutching her designer bag like it was armor. His gaze was steady, unflinching, a silent command for order. He didn't raise his voice. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, already knowing the answer. The flight attendant stood upright, words tumbling out too fast. There was just a seat mix-up. I was about to, but the captain held up a hand, just once, enough to say, "Let me handle it." He turned to Clarence. His posture softened slightly, a sign of respect that didn't go unnoticed. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Clarence handed it over without a word. The captain took it, looked it over once, twice, then nodded slowly. "Sat to A, that's you." Then he turned to the woman. "Ma'am, would you mind showing me yours?" Her face twisted slightly, but she dug into her handbag and handed him her pass. Captain Sanders took a long look. His fingers traced the edges of the pass, deliberate, as if giving her a moment to reconsider her stance. "Ma'am, you're in 5B aisle seat, coach." She blinked. "That's not possible." "I'm afraid it is," he said, then added, "We can call the gate if you'd like, but I've seen these boarding passes a few thousand times." The woman's jaw tightened. She looked around the cabin like it was going to rise up and agree with her, but no one said anything. Her face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defiance as the reality of her mistake sank in. Not the man in 2C, not the couple behind her. Even the flight attendant stayed silent now. And Clarence? He just stared out the window again, his posture unchanged. The captain looked back at him. "Mr.?" he asked gently. "Douglas," Clarence replied. "Clarence Douglas." Captain Sanders gave a short nod. Then, without hesitation, he stood at attention and saluted. It wasn't for show. The gesture was sharp, deliberate, a tribute that silenced the cabin further, amplifying the moment's gravity. It was clean, controlled, respectful. "You served," the captain said. Clarence paused, unsure if he should answer. "Then Air Force long time ago." "I know," the captain said, "that patch on your duffel's worn through, but I recognize the shape. 388th Tactical Fighter Wing, right?" Clarence finally turned from the window. He nodded once slowly. His eyes met the captain's, a shared understanding passing between them. Two men who knew the cost of service. Captain Sanders lowered his salute. "My father used to tell stories about your unit. He said you were the ones that made sure the rest of us got home." There was a different kind of quiet in the cabin now. Not tension, respect. The captain took a breath and looked at the flight attendant. "Get Mr. Douglas anything he wants." His tone was firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation, a clear directive to right the wrong. He doesn't wait and he doesn't move. Not for anyone. Then he looked at the woman. "You'll need to take your assigned seat, ma'am, and I suggest we all move on now." For a second, she didn't move, but something had shifted. The room wasn't on her side anymore, even she could feel that. She gave a stiff nod and walked off without a word, heels clicking hard against the floor. Her departure was a retreat, each step echoing her defeat, the cabin's eyes following her like a spot. The flight attendant cleared her throat. "Mr. Douglas, can I get you a drink, water, something else?" Clarence didn't answer right away. He reached down, opened the side pocket of his duffel, and pulled out a small envelope. Inside it was a folded flyer from his great-grandson's school. He looked at the photo of Malik in costume, grinning with his paper top hat and plastic mustache. Then he looked up. His fingers lingered on the flyer, a tether to the reason he was here. A reminder of what mattered most. "Water's fine," he said. The flight attendant nodded and disappeared into the galley. But not everyone had moved on. A man and coach had just started recording, and the internet was about to meet Clarence Douglas. The phone camera was angled just right, just enough to capture the tail end of the salute, the woman walking back toward coach and Clarence sitting in 2A like nothing happened. The video's raw emotion was already spreading, a spark ready to ignite a firestorm online. The man recording mid-30s ball cap and beard whispered to the woman next to him, "You get that? That was real." She nodded, phone in hand, too. That man didn't even flinch. A few rows back, someone quietly typed on a laptop, headphones around her neck, fingers dancing across the keys. The headline was taking shape, each word chosen to capture the drama. "Veteran humiliated in first-class standoff. Pilot salute shocks all." A headline on the screen, "Elderly veteran asked to move by flight crew. Pilot responds with salute." But Clarence didn't know, didn't care. His phone was a flip. He only used it to call family, internet, social media. He'd never needed any of that. He was staring down at Malik's picture again, thinking about how proud the boy would be to see his great-grandfather watching him from the front row. He traced the edges of the flyer, his heart swelling with anticipation, oblivious to the growing storm his quiet strength had unleashed. While the flight prepared for takeoff, the murmurs continued low, not loud enough to cause trouble, but enough to carry through the rouse. That was wrong what she did. He handled it better than I ever could. People always think they can judge someone by what they wear. Some didn't say anything out loud, just glanced at Clarence and then looked away quickly, ashamed maybe that they hadn't spoken up when they could have. The cabin was a microcosm of society, divided between those who saw injustice and those who chose silence, each passenger grappling with their own role in the moment. Maybe they'd been on the edge of saying something and hadn't found the words. Back in economy, the woman, Dana, sat stiffly in 5B, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a line. She kept her eyes on the back of the seat in front of her, avoiding every glance that came her way. It was as if she hoped that if she didn't move, didn't breathe, the moment would disappear. But it wouldn't. Her fingers gripped her bag tightly, her knuckles white, as the weight of her actions pressed down, the cabin's judgment a silent but palpable force. A young girl sitting across the aisle from her leaned toward her mother and asked just loud enough to hear, "Why was that lady so mean to the grandpa?" The mother shushed her gently, but Dana heard it, and it hit. Still, Clarence didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. He was too busy remembering something else. The girl's words were a dagger, piercing Dana's facade, forcing her to confront the ugliness of her assumptions. Night in 1972, Okinawa. His bunkmate had missed cow and Clarence brought him back a sandwich wrapped in paper towel. The guy was exhausted, barely 20, looked up at Clarence like he was Superman. "You always got my back, man," the kid had said. Clarence never forgot it, never asked for thanks, never needed it, but somehow that line always stuck with him. That memory was a lifeline now, a reminder of why he stayed composed, why he refused to let Dana's words diminish him. Back in the present, the flight attendant returned with a bottle of water. "Here you go, Mr. Douglas," she said softly. He nodded, took it, and said, "Thank you, miss." She hesitated, then said, "I'm sorry about earlier." Clarence looked at her. "You were just trying to keep the peace." But sometimes peace don't come from asking the wrong man to move. His words were gentle but firm, a lesson wrapped in forgiveness, a challenge to do better. She didn't know what to say to that, so she nodded and walked away, but peace wasn't what was coming next. A passenger had just uploaded the video, and within minutes it was already taking off faster than the plane itself. 10 minutes after takeoff, Captain Sanders was reviewing weather conditions when a knock came at the cockpit door. The tension from the earlier incident lingered, a subtle undercurrent in the crew's interactions. It was the co-pilot, Jason Ortega, late 20s, former Navy, still carried that mix of structure and curiosity that younger officers have when they're around someone they respect. "Hey, Cap," Ortega said, pulling the headset down around his neck. "I think you need to see this." Captain Sanders raised a brow. "Something wrong with the weather radar?" "No, not weather." Passenger posted a video. His voice was urgent, tinged with excitement, as he handed over the phone, the screen glowing with the viral clip. "It's going viral already. Like real viral." Captain Sanders leaned back, expression unreadable. "From earlier?" "Yep, got over 5,000 views in under 20 minutes. Comments are blowing up." He handed over his phone. The video was shaky, but the message was clear, the image of Clarence sitting quietly while Dana stood over him. The comments were a storm of outrage and admiration, praising Clarence's grace and condemning Dana's entitlement. The flight attendant's hesitation and the captain's own salute. Sanders watched himself on screen, his hand lifting to his brow. It felt strange seeing it from the outside. He didn't do it for views, he'd done it because it was right. He handed the phone back. "Social media is fast." Jason nodded. "You handled it like a pro." His admiration was clear, but there was a hint of concern. How would this affect the flight, the crew, Clarence? I mean, the whole plane's talking about it now. The cabin crew is getting questions already. The captain took a deep breath and looked through the windshield into the clouds. Let him talk. It's good for people to be reminded what respect actually looks like. Jason leaned on the back of the seat. The crew's wondering if they should check on Mr. Douglas again just to make sure he's okay. The captain didn't answer right away. Then, my dad used to talk about men like him. Said they didn't ask for recognition, just wanted to be left alone to live their lives with dignity. I saw a man sitting in a seat he earned 50 years ago. Jason nodded, his voice quieter. He didn't even flinch when it all went down. His respect for Clarence deepened, mirrored by the captain's own reverence. Just sat there, like it was nothing. It was nothing to him, Sanders said, because he's probably seen worse. He's had to be stronger, quieter, more patient than any of us could guess. A silence filled the cockpit. Not uncomfortable, just weighty. Finally, Jason broke it. What should I tell the crew? The captain checked his instruments, then adjusted the throttle slightly. Tell them to let him be. His directive was clear. A shield around Clarence's peace. And if anybody gives him trouble, first class, coach, or otherwise, they'll be speaking to me. Jason smiled. Will do. He stepped out of the cockpit and closed the door behind him. Back in the cabin, Clarence had finally closed his eyes. Not to sleep, just resting. He knew how to find stillness anywhere. His calm was a fortress, built from years of navigating a world that often refused to see him. It came from years of learning to carry disappointment without letting it change your face. What he didn't know was that thousands of people were now watching that same face online, watching him say nothing and realizing just how powerful that could be. But not everyone watching was a stranger. One of those views came from someone who knew Clarence very well and hadn't seen him in almost 2 decades. The video was a bridge to a past Clarence had never fully left behind. Back on the ground in a quiet apartment just outside Pensacola, Florida, a man sat hunched at his kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at a paused video. It was the same clip from Flight 262, the confrontation, the silence, the salute. He rewound it, played it again, watched Clarence tilt his head slightly when Captain Sanders raised his hand. His heart raced, a mix of guilt and pride, as he recognized the man he'd once walked away from. He paused on that moment, Clarence's eyes full of memory. The man at the table was named Reggie Douglas. Mid-40s, worn hands, faded tattoos. A box of unopened mail sat beside him. The TV in the background played the news on low volume, ignored. He hadn't seen that face in years, not since the funeral. Not since he told his father he wasn't coming back, that he was done. The memory stung, sharp and raw, a wound he'd never let. Now here he was watching him on a stranger's phone screen. Saluted. Reggie's voice cracked when he spoke, even though no one was there to hear it. Still got that same look like you know more than you ever say. He swallowed hard. A photo hung by the fridge, faded, bent. It was him and Clarence, arm in arm, both younger, standing beside an old barbecue pit. The image was a relic of happier days, a reminder of what he'd lost when he chose anger over understanding. That day, they'd cooked for the neighborhood kids all afternoon. Reggie pressed play again. Up in the sky, 30,000 FT above Georgia, Captain Sanders walked the aisle one more time. He didn't usually leave the cockpit twice during a flight, but something felt unfinished. He reached Clarence's row. The old man was awake again, looking out the window like he was reading something written in the clouds. Mr. Douglas, the captain said gently. Clarence turned, eyebrows raised slightly. I just wanted to say thank you, not just for today, but for everything before today. Clarence offered a slight smile. A lot of people did more than me. Maybe, but today you reminded everyone what grace looks like. The captain reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pin. His hand trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the honor of the gesture. Circular bronzicold with a pair of wings carved into it. It was a personal token, one he only gave out to pilots who showed real character. He placed it on Clarence's tray table. This was given to me by my first mentor, said it was for those who rise without making noise. Clarence stared at the pin for a second, then looked up. His fingers hesitated, as if unsure he deserved such recognition. "You sure you want to give that away?" The captain nodded. "I've never been more sure." Clarence picked up the pin, turned it between his fingers. "I had a friend. Vietnam didn't make it home. Always said when someone sees you, really sees you, you stand a little taller." He looked at the captain. "Today I feel taller." The captain smiled, eyes glassy. The moment was intimate, a shared acknowledgement of sacrifice and resilience. "Safe travels, Mr. Douglas," Clarence nodded once. "And to you, Captain." As the captain turned to leave, a few nearby passengers clapped quietly. Not a spectacle, just acknowledgement. Respect. Back in coach, Dana sat still in 5B, earbuds in, face unreadable. She hadn't looked up once. Maybe she couldn't. But not everyone on that plane would forget what they saw, and not everyone would stay silent about it. Her isolation was self-imposed, a cocoon of regret she couldn't yet escape. When the wheels touched down in Savannah, the usual shuffle began. Seatbelts unclicking, overhead bins opening, carry-ons dragged into the aisle like anchors, but something was different. Passengers weren't in a hurry to push past, no sighs, no grumbles. People were watching. Clarence remained seated in 2A, his duffel still above him, his hands resting lightly on his knees. His stillness was a beacon, drawing eyes and hearts alike. The pin from Captain Sanders was tucked into his shirt pocket, snug against his heart. As the rows emptied, a woman in her 30s stepped out from coach. She paused beside him, holding a toddler on her hip. "Mr. Douglas?" she asked quietly. Clarence turned to her. "I just wanted to say thank you. My grandfather served too." "I think he would have liked you." Clarence smiled softly. His smile was warm, a gift to her courage for speaking up. "He probably would have liked you more. You're the one doing the heavy lifting." She chuckled, adjusted her kid, and gave a small nod before continuing down the aisle. Then came a teenage boy, backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't say anything, just held out his hand. Clarence shook it firm and simple. The boy's grip was strong, a silent vow to carry forward the respect he'd witnessed. The boy whispered respect before walking off. Even the man from 2C leaned over. "Sir," he said, clearing his throat, "that was something. You showed real class." Clarence replied, "Not sure I showed anything, just sat still." "Sometimes," the man said, "that's exactly what people need to see." Finally, the flight attendant came back. Her approach was tentative, her eyes carrying the weight of her earlier mistake. Her face looked different, not rehearsed, sincere. "We'll have a wheelchair at the gate if you need help getting through the terminal." Clarence waved her off. "I can walk." She hesitated. "Well, I'm sorry again for earlier." Clarence nodded once. "You learned something that's worth more than sorry." He stood, grabbed his duffel slowly, his knee clicking a bit, and stepped into the aisle. His movements were slow but sure, each step a testament to his enduring strength. Passengers parted for him, a narrow tunnel of acknowledgement. No words, just space. But halfway to the door, someone else appeared. Dana. She was standing beside her seat in 5B, bag on her shoulder, eyes slightly red. She didn't look at him until he was right next to her. "Mr. Douglas," she began. He stopped. "I made assumptions," she said. Her voice trembled, raw with the vulnerability of someone stripped of pretense. Her voice wasn't polished anymore, it cracked on the edges. "I thought I knew everything the second I saw you." Clarence tilted his head slightly, not judging, just listening. "I was wrong. I saw someone and didn't bother to see anything about them." He let that hang for a second, then replied, "You didn't hurt me." His words were a lifeline, offering her a chance at redemption. She blinked. "But you hurt yourself." "That's who you embarrassed. Don't apologize for me. Apologize because you want to be better next time." Dana stood frozen. No words left, just a slow, honest nod. Clarence turned again and stepped toward the front of the plane. By the time he exited, the gate area was half full. The air buzzed with whispers, the story of Clarence's stand already spreading beyond the plane. People from other flights stood nearby, some whispering, others staring. A woman approached with a phone already filming, but he raised a hand. "No, thank you. I've got places to be." He didn't say it sharply, just firmly, like a man who knew the difference between attention and respect. His refusal was a final act of defiance, choosing his purpose over fleeting fame. But as he walked through the airport, another familiar face was watching him from a distance, someone who'd been waiting for years and who had something to say. Clarence had just passed the TSA checkpoint exit when he spotted him leaning against a wall near baggage claim, arms crossed, ball cap low over his eyes. Reggie? Clarence slowed, unsure at first. His heart clenched, a mix of hope and pain, as the past rushed forward. He hadn't seen his son in close to 20 years. Not in person, not since the day Reggie said, "You don't know me, and I don't want to be like you," and walked out of his life. But now, he was here, older, heavier, softer in the face. Clarence stopped, just a few steps away. Reggie looked up for a moment. Neither spoke. Then Reggie said, "You looked smaller on that screen." His voice was rough, laced with regret, a plea for reconnection. Clarence let out a breath through his nose. "You looked younger in my memory." They both stood there for another beat. Reggie broke it. "I saw the video. Someone from my job sent it in a group chat. I almost dropped my damn phone." Clarence chuckled. "Yeah, you watched the whole thing 3 times. Didn't know whether to be mad at the lady or proud of you." The humor was a bridge, tentative but real, between two men longing to heal. "Then I figured maybe both," Clarence shrugged. "Didn't do much." "That's the part that messed me up," Reggie said. "You did it, and that's what made it matter." He scratched his beard, glanced at the floor, then back up. "I came 'cause I figured maybe this was the right time." Clarence didn't say yes, didn't say no. His silence was an invitation, a space for Reggie to step forward. Instead, he asked, "You got kids?" Reggie nodded. "2 girls and a boy. You ever tell them about me?" "No," Reggie admitted, "but maybe it's time I start." Clarence shifted his bag from one shoulder to the other. "I ain't mad at you," he said. Reggie blinked. "Why not? You were angry. You thought leaving would prove something." His forgiveness was a gift, unearned but freely given, a chance to start anew. "I let you go, 'cause I figured you needed to find your own way. Now you're back. That says enough." They stood there like 2 men who had wasted a lot of time but weren't about to waste another minute. "You hungry?" Clarence asked. Reggie cracked a smile. "You asking or challenging me?" Clarence smirked. The moment was light but heavy with promise, a step toward reconciliation. "There's a diner across from the rental car lot. I could use a plate of something that ain't peanuts and pretzels." They started walking, and just like that, without fanfare, without apology, the bridge between them wasn't rebuilt. It was just crossed. That night, Clarence sat in a folding chair in the front row of Shiloh Elementary School's auditorium. His heart was full, not just for Malik, but for the son beside him, a wound beginning to heal. The walls were decorated with construction paper stars and crayon-drawn stage sets. Malik peeked out from behind the curtain, spotted him, and gave a double thumbs up. Clarence waved back, his eyes wet. Next to him sat Reggie, holding a camcorder. His own hands were shaking a little, but he didn't hide it. When the lights dimmed, Clarence leaned over and whispered, "Kid's going to kill it." The words were for Malik, but they were also for Reggie. A promise of presence. Reggie smiled. "He gets that from your side." They laughed, quiet, easy. And when Malik stepped onto the stage and proudly delivered his one line as Mayor Thompson, "Welcome to our town where everyone belongs," the audience clapped politely. But in that front row, Clarence clapped just a little longer, just a little louder. His applause was a celebration, not just of Malik, but of a family rediscovered. There are moments in life when you get asked to move, and sometimes the right thing to do is stay seated. Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn over a lifetime and defend with silence, grace, and truth. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to remember what dignity really looks like. And if you've ever doubted the power of staying true to yourself, let Clarence's story remind you. Sometimes, the quietest stand makes the loudest impact. And if you've been holding back forgiveness, maybe today is a good day to let go. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just sit still.